My name is Dan Finucane, and I'm currently a regent. I love folk music, blues music, and I love singing and playing with other people.
My name is Ian Peoples. I'm a Jesuit regent. I'm kind of a football fanatic. Most of my weekends are spent watching at least a few games. I'm probably one of the biggest Lionel Messi fans.
Welcome back to MagisTalk, where we ask the question, where is God calling me to today? My name is Dan Finucane, and I'm joined by my friend and fellow Jesuit, Ian Peoples.
This episode marks the second installment of our Meet the Jesuits series. And you may have noticed that it's just Dan and I sitting here. Well, we realized that in putting together the series that even though we've shared some of our thoughts and a little bit about our interests, we haven't really shared our stories. And so today we're going to interview our very own Dan Finucane, SJ. So Dan's going to tell us a little bit more about himself. Dan, I hope you're ready to spill the beans.
I feel like I'm in the hot seat a little bit.
No, you are, sir. Just get ready. As you all know, Dan is chaplain at Belize Central Prison, and he also teaches English as a second language to migrant folks a couple days a week. And so let's get started, shall we?
All right.
Sounds
Dan.
Good. Well, Dan, we, like some of our other Jesuits that we live with, specifically Father Brian Christopher, who you'll meet in future episodes, you grew up in St. Louis. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like and what role your faith played early on in your life?
Yeah, sure. We in St. Louis, Missouri, like to refer to ourselves as the Rome of the West. I don't know how true or accurate that is in the sense of population or importance, but it is very true with regard to the fact that it's a very Catholic city. And so, growing up, it's almost like you couldn't throw a stone without hitting a Catholic church in St. Louis. And I think that's true of a lot of cities in the Midwest. But St. Louis certainly is that way. And for me, I grew up in an interesting family in the sense that my mom was a convert to Catholicism. She grew up in a Jewish family. And so holidays were always interesting. We were kind of navigating going to my mom's side of the family and celebrating Hanukkah, in December. And then with our family, the only other Catholics in the family were my dad's brother and his wife. And so growing up in the faith, for me, a really formative piece was that Christmas and Easter were times where our family would welcome in a lot of people, usually from the university where my dad works, people who don't have family nearby. My understanding of faith was people who are welcome at the table. And so, going to Mass, I got a sense of Eucharist, but I very much got a sense of Eucharist around the dinner table with my parents and my brother. I went to Catholic grade school, Catholic high school, Catholic university,
the whole
Catholic
thing,
graduate school, and so thoroughly enmeshed in a Catholic worldview. And there's great things about that. I think there's probably some naivete in there as well, but it was a great upbringing of being brought up Catholic, but also being in touch with other faith traditions, which was interesting.
During Hanukkah, do they get a present each day of Hanukkah?
Yeah, so this is a touchy subject because my brother and I figured out early on that our cousins were getting presents like every day for 8 days, and we got presents like for 1 day. And so that was an early source of contention. But I think as we grew older, I don't know, I feel like I appreciate the fact that we were exposed to that set of traditions along with our own.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting because we just celebrated Easter. And Easter, on Holy Thursday, we do the Mass of the Lord's Supper, right? Where they were celebrating Passover, right? A Jewish feast, a Jewish holiday. So I'm wondering, with this extended side of your family being Jewish and having that as your history, did that help you think about our holiday, the holidays of the Christian faith, and how they're rooted in a lot of these Jewish traditions as well?
Yeah, I'll say this. We actually never participated in Passover with our family, and I think a lot of that is just because my extended family tended to celebrate with other families. Mm-hmm. And so it didn't make a lot of sense for us to celebrate with them. But I think what it did do is it gave me a sense, I think, of the depth behind, something like the Holy Thursday tradition of the Last Supper, and a sense that it isn't just something. I don't know how to put this. It's not. It didn't just come out of nowhere, but it's thousands of years old at this point, and it's been adapted, obviously, and reinterpreted through Jesus. But that idea of God liberating us, and just the richness that has for us as human beings, that's really meaningful.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful that I was exposed at least a little bit to that growing up. And certainly once I got older, that made a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm. And you shared that your dad was a professor at a university that would be St. Louis University, which is a Jesuit school in St. Louis. Mm-hmm. And he's a theology professor, correct?
That's correct.
So you have this theology professor, so I doubt you were able to be naive about too many aspects of our faith, because you had someone who really thought deeply about the faith growing up to learn from him. And what kind of impact did your dad have on your faith formation growing up?
Yeah, I think if my mom sees this episode, she'll chuckle, but my mom would always comment growing up, my dad would go to Sunday Mass kind of like without any like Sunday where he didn't go, even if my brother and I were like, And so there were very rare Sundays where like the three of us wouldn't go and my dad would end up going. And I think there's a way, okay, is it just kind of blind obedience? Maybe you could say that. But for him, I think there's a sense in which the church and that community is really important. And showing up and being a part of that community, having a chance to celebrate the sacrament of Eucharist. And I don't know, for me, that's a witness that I appreciate. The other thing that, since I've gotten older, this has become more apparent, but both my dad and my mom help lead marriage encounter weekends through their parish. And one of the things that they always talk about are the four Eucharistic verbs: take, bless, break, and give. And how, these are the words of Jesus in the Eucharistic prayer that the priest recites on our behalf. And those are also verbs that are integral to any marriage and any family life. Are you willing to take your life, ask for its blessing, break it open for others, and give of yourself? And my dad teaches that, but he lives it. As does my mom, and through the sacrifices that they have made for my brother and I. And so, people often wonder, because my brother is a theology teacher now. I was a theology teacher for a while. It's the family business in a way. And people ask me, did you talk about theology around the dinner table? And to be honest, we didn't. It just wasn't. It wasn't something I grew up with. But in a way, my parents didn't have to. They just lived it. I feel like I grew up learning about the faith through their witness.
Since your dad worked at the Jesuit University, I imagine you encountered Jesuits early on. You went to a Jesuit high school, and then you yourself attended SLU. Can you just tell us memories of your early encounters with Jesuits and what impact they had on you, especially as a kid, I would say?
Yeah, I'll just share this story. So before I share the story, when I was a kid, Jesuits were at the house all the time. Like I mentioned earlier, for holidays, Jesuits often are far away from their family, as we know. And so Jesuits would be over for Christmas, for Easter, and for Thanksgiving. And so I was always around Jesuits and other religious, sisters, other priests. And the story I'm thinking of, I remember being at a Christmas party, and I think I was like 13 or 14 years old. And one of the Jesuits pulled me aside and he started asking me like what I wanted to study in high school and like what language I wanted to take, and I should really think about taking Latin and all this stuff. and I remember just being moved that he was taking an interest in me, having known me since I was born practically. And it felt like I had a mentor, and then he ended up becoming my first teacher at St. Louis U when I went to college. And I learned a lot from him. And I'm sad to say he has severe dementia now and doesn't recognize really anyone. So I think about him a lot, and the impact that he had on me just in that one conversation.
Did you take Latin?
I asked to take Latin and was told to take French instead, which I have never used. So don't ask me to say anything.
So you grew up with a bunch of Jesuits around the house. You were surrounded by them. When did you first start feeling the pull? Like maybe I'm called to be a Jesuit. Can you describe the early beginnings of that call?
Yeah, sure. I think there was the actual feeling of call, and then there were a couple things that led up to it. The couple things that led up to it, one was the learning about the murder of the 6 Jesuits in El Salvador in 1989. I was 2 years old when that happened, but hearing about it when I got to college and reading about it, there was something about it that just really spoke to me. The idea of being so committed to the Catholic faith, and the Catholic faith that as we say as Jesuits, that does justice, and that sought to use an educational a school to help lift people out of poverty. And that was just so moving to me, and to see that, there were Jesuits who were professors, but there were also Jesuits who were very humble, who worked with, elementary schools in that community too. And just being very moved by their witness, and just learning more and more about them, and being interested in living a life like that.
Yeah.
And then I had a professor, John Kavanaugh, who's kind of a famous Jesuit in the United States, and his witness to kind of the radical nature of the gospel, that Jesus shows us a pathway of love, of eternal life, and of peace, and that if we really take that seriously, it means that we try to avoid violence. And how radical that can be, and violence of any kind. And again, his witness is preaching. I would watch him and think, I want to be like that. I want to be like him. And then for me, I had Jesuits from when I was young telling me I should be a Jesuit, and I would ignore them and tell them no. But I went on a retreat as a 21-year-old. And just experienced this profound sense of call on the retreat. and it freaked me out.
How long did it take you to enter the Jesuits after that?
It took me 8 years between that retreat and when I entered in 2017. So.
And we'll get to that space of time, what happened in between those, real quick. If you're interested in learning more about the Jesuits who were martyred in San Salvador, they were at the Universidad Centroamerica. Sorry for my terrible Spanish accent, but that's the UCA. So if you search that online, there's a lot of stuff on there. We both really hold them up as heroes, so it's worth looking up. And then Father John Kavanaugh has a wonderful book called Following Christ in a Consumer Society. It's a classic, and so again, if you want to look that up, that's well worth reading, well worth your time. Going back to that 8-year gap, though, that span of time, can you tell us, of course, we talked a lot, I know you went to Africa after you graduated from university. Can you tell us a little bit about why you went to Africa and what you did there and how that's impacted your faith as well?
Yeah, so I went a couple times. The first time, it was right after I graduated from undergrad, from college, and it was like something out of the gospel in the sense that there was a Franciscan priest who was a kind of mentor to me, who like a year in advance, he was over for dinner at our house, and he said, "Do you want to go to Africa?" And I was just like, all right, sure, that sounds good. And I thought, I'll never hear about this again. And then about 6 months later, he said, are you still interested? I said, yeah. He's like, great, give me your passport information. And then, 5 months later, we ordered tickets and got a visa and all that. And it was such a striking moment. It was like graduating from university, like being in this transition period, and like 2 days later going to Africa. And it was just bizarre. So while I was there, I just had a couple of profound experiences that made me want to go back. Chief among them, I met a man who was dying of AIDS in a hut, kind of in a compound area, and I remember just breaking down after meeting him, and my mentor, Father Wayne, just saying, if you haven't cried, you haven't been here. It's just that kind of place, and it's okay. It's okay to let the reality kind of burrow into you. And so I really wanted to go back. I'd already committed to continuing my schooling for a couple of years to study theology. But as soon as that was ending, I was kind of afraid to go back to Zambia. That was the country I had gone to. I was kind of afraid just because I didn't know what I would do. I didn't know like how I'd get paid, if at all. I didn't want to be a burden on the community I was going to be with. So I applied to a bunch of jobs and put my parents through a couple of metaphorical heart attacks because I turned job offers down and couldn't make up my mind. And then I finally just realized I really feel called. It's my first time using discernment, really, to figure out what was consoling, what was leading me to a sense of peace, and it was to take this risk and go. And once I did that, once I went, it was not a perfect experience, but it was an experience of feeling like God was calling me to do something, responding to it, and finding that God would sustain me when I said yes. And that was a profound step for me vocationally, because I think without that, I don't know if I ever would have.
So you went to Africa, if I understand correctly, twice?
I did. And
what was the span of time you were there each time?
The first time it was about 2 weeks, and then the second time it was about 8 or 9 months.
8 or 9 months, yeah, okay. And then when you got back from Africa after that extended period, you came back to your alma mater, St. Louis University High School, Junior Billikens.
Junior Billikens.
Pelicans?
Pelicans.
So tell us, what was it like being back at your alma mater, and how did that impact your... I imagine the call was still kind of there. Maybe you still were feeling it a little bit, but what was that like?
Yeah. So, it was like I picked the place that was farthest away to go in going to Zambia. And then I picked the place that was like the closest I could have picked to go back to. And for me, there was something in that of I think, still being a little fearful of what, and fearful in the sense of, wasn't sure I wanted to trust God enough to give my life over to a religious vocation. And so, going back to a place that was familiar, and a place that formed me and introduced me in a deeper way to the Jesuits. I went in thinking I'll be here for a year, and then at the time I was thinking I'll move back to Africa. Well, I ended up being there 4 years, and a couple things happened that really got me thinking and eventually applying to the Jesuits. One, it's a longer story, but the short version is that I encountered a Jesuit, Father Ralph in St. Louis, who I was told to go talk to, and it's kind of like my Yoda moment where I'm like, all right, he's going to have all the answers to all my questions about life and vocation and all this. So I went to talk to him, and I, did my song and dance about, I'm teaching at the school, I like my job, but, I also feel kind of called to be religious, and I don't know what to do about that. And he just looked at me and listened for a while, and he goes, all right, well, do you like your job? And I said, yeah, I love my job. He's like, great, just keep doing it. And I was like, wait, what? That's not the sage wisdom I was expecting, And he continued, and he said, when you start to get bored, then go back to the vocation question. Go back to God and ask what it is that you should do. And that confused me, honestly, because I was like, well, I'm never bored. I'm always stressed because I have so much to do. But about 3 or 4 months later, I knew exactly what he meant, because I was sitting in my office sometime in October, I remember, and I realized I'm bored. And for me, that meant I like this job a lot, and I could do it for 30 more years. But I want something more than just a job with my life. I want a life, and I want it to be meaningful in a way that extends beyond a school, as great as the school is. I want a mission. The second thing that happened, I went to a conference and had this woman sit next to me and ask me weird questions that kind of piqued my interest. And as we were talking, she just kind of said, what's your deal? What's your deal? What? You're not married, right? I was like, no. She's like, and you're not a Jesuit? I was like, no. She's like, then what gives? What's your deal? What are you going to do? And
very direct.
Very direct. And we ended up talking the next day for a couple of hours. And at one point, she just asked me, she said, do you think God really is as anxious about what you're going to do with your life as you are? Do you think God cares, what you do? And I was like, yeah. She was like, I think what God wants is your happiness and your joy. And once you get to know God, and once that relationship becomes important and at the center of your life, what you do with your life is going to come from that. That's the most important thing. And I was like, okay. And she became a spiritual director, a companion who I would talk to on a monthly basis for the next 2 years.
Wow.
This is before Zoom, so she lived in a different city, and so we would meet over Skype. And she's a huge reason why I ended up entering her encouragement and companionship.
And One thing we haven't talked about yet, but that our audience sees every time they watch our show at the beginning, is you strumming that guitar. And I know music has been in your life for a long time because you're an excellent guitar player, and you don't get that good unless you spend much too long practicing, many, many hours. So can you tell us about what led you to falling in love with music?
Yeah. I loved listening to music as a kid. And my dad plays. He still plays, although not as much as he should.
Who's better? Who's the better guitar player?
I think he is. I think he's a little more polished than
that might be modesty. I want to hear your dad play.
He's more polished than I am, for sure. But when I was a kid, he would play for my brother, my mom, and I. And it was just a wonderful experience. And so when I was like 12, 13, I asked him to teach me. And he like taught me a few chords, and he was like, all right, you're on your own. Go learn. I think he was busy. But it actually, that really helped me because it gave me like, okay, if I'm going to learn, it's got to be my initiative. I never took lessons or anything. And I think for me, what I've grown to really love about guitar is, I think when I was younger, it was a way of like showing off, and it was a way of attracting women, and like serenading. That was a real thing for me. But I think as I've grown older, what's become more important is that it is such a source of joy to like lead other people and be with other people singing and playing music. And being at the prison, there are just days where if I get out the guitar and we're all singing, it's just the whole room changes. And I just kind of wonder at it. It's just I think this is a quote I'm getting from someone else. I didn't look this up, but music is a quickening art. It quickens the soul. It brings the soul alive, and that's so true. And getting to do it in church, it's just given me. It's helped me grow in confidence. I used to hate singing in front of people, and still do a little bit, but much less than I used to.
One of those quotes, well, I don't know if this is the quote you're thinking of, but it's in Screwtape Letters, in C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters, which if y'all haven't read, it's letters written from a demon uncle to his demon nephew, and they're trying to tempt people, but it's kind of getting at our faith sort of from the other way around, and it's very interesting when he talks about how much they hate music because it quickens the soul, and it's like laughter in that sense, and that heaven's full of it, and so yeah, I was just listening to the audio version of Screwtape Letters, so it made me think of that. And like you said, it plays such a big role in our ministry at the prison. There's days when, there's times when I'm doing groups that Dan is usually at with me doing, and we often begin with music. And I say we, I mean Dan leading the music. And there's just something missing when that's not there. It just feels a little emptier. It feels a little less joyful. Like music really does bring that wonderful element. I'm wondering who are maybe one or two of your favorite artists?
Yeah. Well, there's artists that I can attempt to play, and then there's artists that I just kind of admire from a distance. But I really one of the artists that I look to, and I've learned a lot from, is Paul Simon. In two ways. One, just like him as a musician and learning to play folk music like him. But then and I think, I think he's been criticized a little bit for this, but he's taken a lot of different musical styles from around the world and brought them into his own music. Some people say that he's stealing that or whatever, but to me, I learned about those musical styles from him. And so I'm grateful, and it's helped me. It's been a gateway for me. The fact that he's so curious and so interested in other cultures and how they make music, and how their souls are quickened. That I don't know. I like him a lot. There's another artist, Chris Thiele, who's a mandolin player, and what I like about him, he's just a genius. He can play classical music. But he can also play like R&B or hip hop, or bluegrass or folk or country. He can just pick up and he can play anything. He's a virtuoso. And there's something intimidating about that, but there's also something beautiful about just watching somebody who's so good at something.
Yeah, it reminds me, the other day, Dan and I were watching Hamilton together. I don't know if y'all have seen Hamilton, but it's just excellent. The whole thing is excellent. It's a musical that was on Broadway. But we were watching it, and I was like, I wish I was that good at something. But Dan here is very, very good at guitar. So hopefully, maybe one day we'll have a tiny concert here in studio. A tiny desk concert. NPR does it. Look it up. You'll see it. It's wonderful. But back to the questions.
Okay. All right.
So you're here in Belize.
Yes.
How did you get here? What brought you here? And why are you working at the prison?
Yeah.
And answer those questions first.
Sure. I got here by plane.
That's clever. Thank you for that. He could have swam here. We didn't know. I'm glad he answered. We didn't know.
I'm sorry. I couldn't resist. I got here because the way the Jesuits work is that we have superiors who send us places, and I expressed desires I had as I was finishing up philosophy studies in Chicago, and basically what was coming to prayer was a couple things: wanting to be among people who were kind of hidden away, and then wanting to learn how to listen. And I put that in front of our superior, our provincial is his official title, and he had spent some time here, Father Tom Green. Some of you might know him, and he just said, "How about Belize?" And my immediate reaction was like, "What?" It just wasn't. I had been here several years ago, but I'd almost forgotten that.
You had forgotten about Belize.
Well, yeah, I had, and forgive me. I know it's terrible. Please don't write any nasty comments on the video. But as I prayed within, I just kind of imagined being here. It became more and more consoling, and when I was presented with some options of ministries, as soon as I heard prison ministry, my heart was like, yeah, that. And I've done a little bit of prison ministry in the States, but nothing to the extent of what we do. And so that, and then reading a story about Pedro Rupe being in a prison in New York City back in a long time ago, and him just like having these incredible encounters with people, and being able, he met this guy who I think had murdered a couple of his wives, and Rupe just refused to accept the fact that this guy was only a murderer, and he kept like, he was like, I know there's something here, and he found out that this guy had kids, and he said, tell me about your kids, and the guy, his guard went down. And he said, if only I could just hold my kids. And Rupe knew he'd broken through to this person and the fact that they were still capable of love. And I remember just thinking like, man, if I could be a part of something like that, I'd give anything for that. That'd be amazing. And honestly, talking to you, I mean, I think we had a Zoom conversation where I was just asking questions and figuring it out, and hearing your experience, I think, helped a lot too.
I didn't even know. I didn't know. I want to know what that story is with Pedro Rupe. So after the show, you'll have to show that to me.
Sure thing.
What have you learned doing prison ministry here? You know, we go there 3-4 days a week, and we're in it. We get to see a lot of parts of the prison. We get to see a lot of people in different situations, and we've gotten to know a lot of guys there. So what have you learned? What's been the experience?
Yeah, I've learned that I know less than I think I do about prison, the gospel, you know, and it's not because what I know is untrue, but because I learn from the men that I work with. And so they've really expanded my understanding. And I think one of the things that I have come to learn is that, you know, often guys will say things that at first catch my ear and like, what did he just say? And I'll have to like really think about what he has said and realize that this guy is deeply intelligent, but he maybe has never had the opportunity to really pursue education, you know, or you know, he made it through a few standards, but just didn't get through high school. But he's deeply intelligent, and he's working out a way of making sense of a really chaotic situation. Either his life on the streets or his life in the prison, or both. And just learning to marvel at the ways in which God is still working in guys' lives. I think the other thing I've learned is that our God is a God of the lost. And, you know, hearing stories from guys of them feeling lost, feeling broken, feeling like they know life in the streets and they know they don't want it anymore because they're in their 30s or their 40s or their 50s, and they're tired of it. And they want to live a life where they do good for others, where people are proud of them and their family. And being in a position to point to, you know, say the scriptures, lately just going to Luke 15 a lot, being like, God is the God of the lost. You know, the lost coin, the lost sheep, the lost son, you know, and that it's not about having your act together, actually. It's admitting you don't. It's admitting that you need help. And that's true for me. I think it's true for all of us.
No, it's true for me.
Yeah, you know, and I wouldn't be here had I not admitted I was lost. That 8-year kind of period of wandering a bit earlier in my life to get to be a Jesuit is evidence for me. So I think those are two big things I've learned from working at the prison.
And one final question, you might have already answered it, but I just want to ask it more directly, is where do you find God at work in Belize? So we talked about the prison, but maybe in the wider sense in general, but where do you find God at work here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I find God in the perseverance of not just the men at the prison, but I think of people I've met in different walks of life here in Belize. And maybe I appreciate that because of feeling like maybe American culture, it's just different, and the kinds of challenges that are more prevalent there are just different. But you know, I think of just the way in which seeing God's presence in the ways that people continue to hold on to hope and faith, even in the midst of circumstances that I would have given into despair long ago. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dan. I think that's most of my questions. you get a little glimpse into Dan and I's sort of daily reality, because we drive to the prison together. We do a lot of groups and ministry out there together. So we're constantly talking. But it's great to just ask, maybe have an excuse to ask more direct questions about your upbringing and about, what's inspired you. So I've learned some new things today. And I feel like I know you better through this conversation. So I know our audience has definitely gotten a glimpse inside your life. So thank you for sharing and being vulnerable. And it's wonderful to share this vocation with you and this show and friendship. And we're still going to end with a final question.
We have to.
And I don't know if you've seen this one. And this one might be a little bit goofier than it usually is.
Good.
Yes, I know he loves the goofy questions.
I'm a goofball.
You should hear the questions that he wants to pose that I turned down. But this one,
okay.
If you could have one superpower, what would it be and why?
Oh gosh.
Mm-hmm.
One superpower. It would probably be flying.
Flying. Say more. Why?
The times I've gotten to fly in my dreams have been cool. And I think there'd be something, I would love to fly. I would love to be able to fly out over water, over forests, and just kind of look down.
Would you be impervious to the elements when you're flying, though? Because let's say you fly 30,000 feet up, it's like sub-zero temperatures up there.
No, that's a good point. Yes, I would be able to not be bothered by that.
Okay, well, lightning wouldn't be a problem.
No.
Wind, okay.
No. I'd be protected from all that.
Well, that's. Okay.
I don't know if that's.
We don't know how. We don't know how. No.
We don't have to know how.
We don't have to. It's a superpower.
That's right.
It doesn't even exist. So, except in your dreams. All right. Well, thank you.
And Ian, I'll ask you the same question. Superpower.
So I used to have a very specific answer to this.
Okay.
I made the question up, so I came ready. Okay. I used to say that I would be able to touch any book in the world and completely absorb and use the contents completely. So if it was a book on language, I would be able to speak languages. It'd basically be like downloading information. Mm-hmm. And then I read in this book that I didn't absorb upon touching, but I had to take time reading. It's called The Intellectual Life. It's kind of a hooty-tooty name, but it's a good book. It's about studies. But the book says that the mark of a vicious and lazy soul is to want to get things without working for them.
Wow.
And I was like, better change my superpower. That taught me. So growing up, I'll just maybe this will be a little insight into my life. Growing up, when I had dreams about being a superhero, it was only two superheroes that I ever was.
Okay. It
was either A, Spider-Man. I mean, he's not flying, but he kind of is, and he's super strong, and he's fun. He's a fun superhero. Yeah. And then his kind of polar opposite, Wolverine. Wolverine, he's kind of angry. All he has are claws. He has super healing as well. He's also, I think, got super strength. So those are the two. I wouldn't mix them together though. It wouldn't be a combination of it. I'd probably lean towards Spider-Man.
Okay.
Because swinging from buildings is when I've done it in my dreams, it's super fun.
Pretty cool.
It's super fun. So.
Now you've kind of got a Wolverine look going.
I do.
Right now, if you just got rid.
And if I do the hair, it would Sorry about that.
Wolverine.
I could do some Wolverine look, but I don't got the claws. Yeah. So.
One can hope.
It's never gonna happen. All right. Thank you all for joining us, Dan. Thanks again for a fun episode and for sharing about your life. Again, if you have things that you want us to talk about and cover on this show, then please let us know in the comments, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. And if you're watching this on Guadalupe Media's television channel, thank you for joining us. And if you're on the radio, then we want to wish you a very good day. And we'll be with you next time. Bye, y'all.
Bye.